underground facilities report. Maybe touch on the.
We're looking for holes because of the way that we're organized. I am still concerned that we miss any like instrumentation kind of specific things. So let's just go through and do this. Okay, so welcome everyone. We're in the underground frontier instrumentation frontier cross-cutting. As you have probably seen in the Indico agenda, there is not actually an agenda for this session. Because of the timing of this session in relation to the week, we've already kind of been through a lot of the stuff with UF for the week. We had our plenary yesterday. And so my intent for this session is to seek for where there are gaps in what our reports show. And I'm grateful that we have two representatives here from Instrumentation Frontier to help with that. So my intention is to just sort of scroll through our reports. You'll see that not all of them are completely developed at this point, but you will be able to see the outlines. And I think with any of the sessions that you've seen previously during this week, you will be able to understand what might be absent or missing from our reports. Another way of saying this is, when we originally launched SNOMAS back in 2021, we had a topical group called UF3, which was underground detectors, which was actually, in my mind, intended to be the underground facilities for quote unquote instrumentation frontier. It's supposed to be that one of those connection points. That topical group never really got off the ground. And whenever we talked about it, it always sounded a lot like the synergistic thing. And so we just kind of rolled those into like what's synergistic. And yet at this stage, I'm still concerned that there are like instrumentation cross-cutting facilities things that are of concern. For example, like, I don't know if there's any discussion in the instrumentation frontier on like cryogenic distillation, for example, where, you know, you have something going on and we would have an interest in it. So that's the kind of things where I'm looking for gaps that we might want to identify and then add to the report somewhere. So let me scroll through these reports and then we'll have a little bit of discussion. And Mike? Yes, Mike Headley has joined us here in the room, and we have a couple people online. So it could be just a few of us having a discussion, and then we can wrap up.
I'm looking at your draft. Is there a UF06 section that's going to be written?
There is, but it will be so.
The ask at the end.
The way that we were charged, they wanted us to be the ask. In practicality, we have to write a frontier report in addition to all this stuff. So UF6 is actually going to be like,
Frontier, this is your report.
no, it's actually going to be data on underground facilities, because we don't have that elsewhere. We kind of do in supporting, but we're going to be like, okay, well, supporting is like about assay and like, you know, square footage. We want to talk in 6 about like, well, okay, at a high level, here are what the underground labs around the world are, give some stats. And then in the very short executive frontier report summary is where you'll actually have the asks. We plan on that thing being very short.
Like that plot you put up the other day.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. If there's only a few people, could you perhaps get closer to the mic for people who aren't John?
Sorry about that. I forgot to turn on my mic. So UF6 will have things like the plot that John showed the other day in the plenary of all the facilities and square footage and depth.
Yeah, we've got another one actually. Everyone can have a mic. Okay, I apologize. I'm trying to get something in front of me to take notes. UF, IF. Okay. All right, and just to confirm, those online can see the screen currently on the DPF Community Planning Exercise Snowmass 21 page.
Yep, this is Danielle. I can see the screen.
Okay.
So one thing that hasn't come up, if we could address it in this, if there are any things that I think the parallel session that we're concurrent with is IF plus NF. And so if anyone would also like to speak to the needs that apply to, let's say, neutrino physics, or if anyone in the room is specifically involved in that, sorry, I can't see who is in the room. That would also be great. I know there is a parallel session going on at the moment, but we could also perhaps address some of that here and we could include it. With respect to how they affect underground facilities specifically.
Okay, since that's going on elsewhere, I'm not sure we'll be able to have those folks contribute, but we will attempt.
So there was one thing that came to us in IFOA just the other day, was getting a little bit more in on the underground argon needs for the low background dune module. I think that's related to what you were asking about. I mean, so you were saying a moment ago that one of the holes you thought would be a low background argon facility, right? Did I hear that right?
Actually, I just meant cryogenic distillation, but your point about underground argon is entirely appropriate. It's exactly the thing that we want to capture, because I haven't done it yet, but as I'll show you in the reports, we're not structured in a way that captures that kind of an activity, but we need to.
Mhm.
So I just wrote down underground argon. I think I know what that is. So let me go through these reports just to show you what the outlines are. They're not as far along as we would like them, so please bear with us. Okay, so underground facilities for neutrinos first covers accelerator neutrinos, which is, as has been described, fairly ballistic. And so a lot of the discussion is around the SURF facility and its spaces. That's what's in there. And then again, I just want people to see the structure here. Then we talk about neutrinoless double beta decay, and we lay out the current suite of experiments and what facilities are needed for those, and the infrastructure associated with those specific types of experiments. And then I guess there's some goals there. And then lastly, this is very just sketchy right now, but it's to address astrophysical neutrinos or neutrinos from other natural sources. So just to kind of give an overview of this, like this is about what the specific needs are to do the science associated with these types of experiments, right? So things that cut across or that are, you know, key challenges in infrastructure or facilities, they will get noted here, but they won't get expanded on, right? That would have to probably show up somewhere else in our reports. So then we go to COSMIC, and it has the same kind of outline. Now this one is the furthest behind, but it's basically, you know, direct detection dark matter, go into current and future experiments, describe the different types. This is very similar to the outline that Scott gave yesterday, liquid nobles, bolometers, and then other technologies. So again, it's going to call out those things and what their requirements are, but probably won't go into specific detail about like challenges associated with some of the infrastructure or facilities associated with this. Like it says, we need this, but it may not have like the, you know, the full paragraph or page that we might want on it if it's something that we're asking to, you know, pursue. That's clear. Now, you might think that this could perhaps show up in supporting capabilities, and maybe that is the case where it's appropriate. Here, the goal was really to look at like the key underpinning capabilities for building low background experiments. So we have, a list of those experiments. And then as was outlined by Alvin yesterday, they did this survey asking the experiments and also the laboratories what they have for facilities, like what are the clean room capabilities existing, right? So think of like existing or planned, radon reduced clean rooms, existing or planned, and assay related things associated with, counting and other methods for measuring radial impurities in materials. And that is essentially, let's see what they have subordinates here. Right, and then they get to their conclusions. So you can see that like the way that this is structured in this section, if there's like an underground facility need that is not related to cleanliness or backgrounds, we haven't captured it yet, right? So that's why I used like cryogenic plants as an example of something that the way we're structuring these documents thus far may not be captured. And that's what I really want to try to get as where those gaps are in our documentation.
So in Scott's talk yesterday, he talked about underground test stands for dark matter detectors. So is that still going to be in the UF2 report, do you think?
So we
Just to do-
need that, and that was one of the things that we had intended to have in this UF3 topical, but that never really got off the ground.
But do you see it going into UF2 now? I'd assumed it would since it was in Scott's talk, I guess.
That's an excellent point. Let me just write it down first. So R&D test stands is what you're saying, is what Scott pointed out.
We'll also be pointing it out in UF1. I know that neutrino-less elevator decay is primarily funded elsewhere, but that's one of the places where we think there is a lot of synergy both with CF and with IF, and it's something that several of our PIs have really been pushing for because we need the same type of underground shielded access for testing our, especially like some of the bolometer and semiconductor neutrino-less elevator decay experiments.
So, I mean, most of the facilities are outlined in IF9, and because of prior conversations, we basically are just going to point to the UF for all of the low background and underground facilities. So we really should make sure we do not have holes. Because
Right.
we were just going to say, we're not talking about underground and low background facilities. They're covered in the underground facilities section of the report,
Which I think you can do.
which I think we can do. But
Yeah.
I just want to make it very clear there is nothing in the facilities section of IF9 on underground facilities at all, because we didn't want to be duplicative and miss things.
Okay, so then just to complete this for completeness sake, the synergies section, I can't remember who was in the synergy section, is really just contributions from the broader community, underground research community, where each group gave us basically science goals, current underground research base, what they're using underground space for, usage needs, and an outlook. And this is just repeated for each of the different areas where we were able to solicit a contribution from these different research groups. And so you can see that the way this is again structured, it doesn't necessarily dig into specific instrumentation, facilities, hardware development that would be required for high energy physics capability, high energy physics science. We do plan on actually taking the quantum information science portion of this and elevating it in the order and adding an additional subsection, which is about the overlap between high energy physics research and quantum information science. So it's going to get an additional section beyond the sort of 4 sections that are standard for all of these. And that one's going to, that additional section is specifically going to talk about the overlap related to sensors and what the underground facility infrastructure to support those kinds of synergistic QIS, HEP research would look like. It's not going to be much, maybe half a page, but it will at least capture this overlap and how like we need dilution refrigerators, standardized platforms that people can go and put things in and make cold, this kind of stuff.
So in that section, you can point back to IF9 for device fabrication because we do cover the need to be able to produce, silicon and superconducting devices. So, I mean, you can put a throwaway sentence that, the discussion of the devices that go into those dill fridges is elsewhere.
That's
if you need
great.
to,
So I got that. Okay, so at this point, I've shared everything I wanted to share, and now I open it up and say, what are we missing? What do we need to add? I'll tell you what I have in my list in my notes already. Underground argon, I think we know what to do with that. I don't know where we'll go, but I think we know what we need to add. R&D test stands, and this is like, broad across the field in general. I also put a note in, consider Scott's UF1, UF2, like he has this one slide where he kind of goes over there, like go back and review that. A note to look at IF9, quote, there's nothing in underground facilities here, but I need to look at it. And then QIS, point back to IF9 for device fabrication.
I have a question, John. Do you already have, I assume in neutrino double beta decay, you have things like the interest in growing germanium crystals underground, doing purification of those things in?
I don't know if they are.
Can you say that again, please?
Yeah, I don't know if you were on, Jim.
Sorry, I was not on. So I was wondering if the section on neutrinoless double beta decay has facilities like underground crystal growth or purification. And I don't know if the silicon backgrounds are going to the point where you have to do underground tritium remediation or anything like that, or if you can do that above ground.
So we don't have anything like that in the report yet, but I'm happy to, is this a good place to talk about what we should add?
Yes, it's a good place for the discussion. I don't think any of us are committing to where it shows up in the report other than we need to figure out where. So please.
Okay, so for underground crystal growth, we haven't really talked about that. It hasn't come up in any of the discussions for us for US facilities, but it may be that we just have not, unfortunately. Would you mind adding a few more details or who you think we should talk to? Or would you let me know what you want to see in the UF section for that here? Because that actually is a major thing, but I had not considered it.
Yeah, I think people like John Wilkerson, David Radford would probably be good. John knows who to talk to about that. I think.
Dongming.
Yeah, Dongming would be good. So I think Dongming is the one who was trying to get that set up at SURF, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
And then I don't know, John, you did those studies some time ago about activation products in silicon, and then there was some work being done on whether you could remediate the tritium in particular by baking. I don't know where all of that research is and whether there's any of that that needs to be done underground.
I'll answer that in a second, but I want to hear if Danielle has any follow up.
I'm listening to this as well, so that would be great if you could respond.
Okay, so for the Silicon 32, so this is a technical aside, update, whatever. So we've been looking at that with the work we're doing for Oscura at PNL. I'm sure we have collaborators elsewhere, and I'm not remembering who they are. It's not something that I personally do, but I have seen the results. They have been able to show that they can bake silicon and get tritium out. I don't think the conclusions are in yet, but it looks promising that there is a remediation route. Can you bake a device and still have the device work? Don't know, right? But the progress so far is promising and doesn't suggest that you need to like put a boule puller underground. Like people are like, oh, we can do this, right? So I noted Silicon 32 baking, which actually means it's a UG polar question mark.
Yeah, I was recently on the DMNI review panel, so I believe, if I recall correctly, that would be a step they do above ground before they make the CCDs. So I don't think they need to do that underground. And if they do, it's relatively low temperature because the process device, you can't go very high in temperature. So even if they had to
high?
do it underground, I don't think they would need a lot of footprint, but it would be good to talk to Juan or somebody about it.
Juan Estrada.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask more about that? You know CCDs.
I know something about CCDs.
You know
Yes.
more than I know about.
Yes.
Okay. We agree on this. So the temperatures that they were looking at were like in the, you know, hundreds of C. Like they did like 200, 300, 400, 500. And looked
Yeah,
at-
I
and
think
they
to
just,
get tritium out, they were looking at 400 or 500.
that's right.
Yeah.
So you would not put a CCD into 500 C oven?
I don't think so with the aluminum. Once you have the metals on, that's pretty hot.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Although Farah might know. So if you had a CCD,
don't-
how hot could you bake it?
Oh, I.
Or a CMOS device or something that's got aluminum on it? How hot could you possibly bake that?
Just operating a chip at higher temperatures?
No, just they want to bake tritium out of it. So
Oh.
just put it in an oven, bake it, and expect the device to work still.
Not sure. I know how cold you can do it. I don't know how hot you can do it.
Yeah, so I think
Uh,
that's unknown, really.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if Juan's done anything on that side, on that piece of the puzzle yet.
No, as far as I know, we have.
I don't think they have.
No, it's part of our R&D program
Yeah.
for Oscura.
Yeah.
And it's just they've done the, like, you know, chunk of silicon baking, reset the clock. Exactly. They've done that part of it. The next part is like, where in the fabrication process can you do it? Obviously you can do it when it's just a crystal, right? But can you do it later in the process? That's going to be continued R&D. Okay.
Sorry, don't know the answer.
So in terms of where that goes in the report, can you remind me, does underground copper electroforming does show up somewhere, right?
It's got to be in here somewhere, but now that you asked me about it, I don't know where it is.
'Cause
It's mentioned in DBD barely, but there, because a number of people have mentioned that they wanted electroforming facilities. I think that it's more in UF4, but I would need to look at their report again to see if that's the case. But it was mentioned on the surveys and in several of the talks this week. So I think people are aware.
Well, yeah,
So-
okay.
So would these other crystal growth kind of things go in UF4 also then?
That could be, yes, I think that could be the case. As a supporting facility that would support all of the underground science, it does make sense.
Yeah, I rather like the idea of trying to get all of that into one subsection so that it's pretty clear what all of those needs are across all of the technologies.
I'm sorry, Jim, can you repeat what all of those?
Well,
is
so
referring to?
everything like, radon reduction, crystal growth, copper growth, ICP-MS underground, if you ever have to do that. Having all of those in one section, so there's sort of one place to look and find the whole suite of things you might need underground would be useful.
Well, so radon and ICP-MS would be are or should be in here. So the question is do we have enough on electroforming and crystal growth? And that's an open question for me. If
Yep.
we have enough in here.
Yeah, I see one sentence there on additional underground fabrication of germanium detectors. So it's a placeholder there at least.
Yeah. So we might want to do some augmentation
Yeah, it's always hard for me with Snowmass to know whether you just have a sentence about the existing capability and say we need to maintain it, and most of it's about what is new that you need, or if you really want to go into great depth about the stuff that already exists. And I always struggle with that in reports like this.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think the key thing to think about how UF4 has been built out is a survey was done, an analysis of the survey results was done. So, that's a great way of doing things, and it gives you lots of good information. They've got nice pie charts that try and break down what the needs are. But it won't lead to like a description of, what current and future electroforming needs might be, because it's like the surveys aren't structured that way, right? So that's why we're having this conversation, is to try and capture like, well, what should get its own, paragraph or subsection or whatever.
So this could definitely show up at least as a paragraph in terms of a need for NDBD, for example, but the question that I have is related to this, in that, is there sort of a pyramid structure that's intended where great detail, great in quotes, goes, and some of the individual reports, and then that gets distilled for the executive reports, and then that gets distilled further for the final Snowmass summary? And in that case, is this the place where we should include the detail that people are asking about? Or is that the correct way to think about it?
Yes,
in that
it is.
case-
It's a tiered pyramid waterfall structure, however you want to analogize it, where the topical reports are supposed to provide enough detail so that people can understand what the requirements for the future high energy physics research is. And then the frontier report is supposed to capture the high level, like, these are the things that really matter, that you really need to take action on now in this period. And then the overall Snowmass report will then further distill it down into like, here are the 20 things that must happen. So that's
Right.
the objective. And because US does not have a lot of white paper input, it means we need to be thoughtful to ensure that our documentation at least covers everything. Doing so in great depth is probably beyond our capability, and just in terms of time.
How much time do we have to finalize the report? That was a related question as well. I
I'm gonna
saw
get-
somewhere nominally like 2 weeks, but how much time do we have?
Yeah, I'm going to totally get in trouble if I answer this question with any specific date. I have heard everything from like, you need to have it done now by the end of Snowmass, to, well, next week, and then it's October. So they haven't given us clear guidance.
So what we were told yesterday was we have until the end of August, whatever that means for us. So many people are on holiday and things. So, to the point
Yeah.
where maybe you need to get it done tomorrow, maybe you have a month.
Yeah, I know. I feel like for UF, just the sociology, all of it, we should really try and get it done in August. I feel like if it lingers, it just won't happen. I think we're close. I actually feel like we may be the furthest behind, but we have maybe the shortest distance to go.
And I guess for people who haven't been through this before, IF and UF, and, we're not one of the 5 pillars of HEP. So when you get up to the highest level, you should think about whether there is one bullet that this community wants to argue is part of the 20, because, at that highest level, those bullets are going to be 99%, physics drivers. And to get something from Intensity Frontier underground facilities or something on that list, it needs to be really well motivated, very succinct, broad in some sense, and is going to take continued advocacy for it. And I will say, last Snowmass, we tried an instrument Frontier and just got beaten down to the point where it just became a bullet. I think we had a bullet at like number 25 on that list, and it's just diluted at that point.
Right.
So if you have some really compelling message that you want to make, plan on needing a lot of advocacy for that to make the final, highest level Snowmass bullets.
Right. So I think you were in the session, Jim, yesterday. So we have 4 conclusions. The first 2 are the real punchy ones. Effectively do Dune, do G3. There's supporting material for that.
Those will get done anyway. The other frontiers will advocate for that.
Are you sure about that?
Do Dune, yes.
Okay, do Dune, yes. G3 is not as clear. So that's not this session, but those would be the ones that we think would bubble up, potentially bubble up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from what you said the other day, if one wants to advocate that while the mining equipment is underground, one should make more space, that is the kind of bullet that you ought to think about. Do you really want to advocate that that goes way to the top of the, gets really highlighted or not? Because that's the sort of thing nobody else is going to advocate for.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. And that is one of the spirited conversations that we were having between the UF conveners and the steering committee right now. So you're spot on. Okay, so other things that we want to try and capture, I'll just go down my list of what I have taken notes on. We need to capture underground argon, R&D test stands, a note to me to look at IF9. QoS is going to get additional space in the synergistic report and can connect to IF9 for device fab. We should evaluate whether things like underground crystal growth, that would include silicon, electroforming, are appropriately fleshed out, probably in the supporting capabilities section. Are there other things that we need to capture that would somehow miss UF or IF as they're currently structured? Mike.
I think on the R&D test stand thing, I would note the way Scott presented it. In his mind, it looked like he might have been talking only about dill fridges. And I think there will be needs for underground liquid noble things as well. Because there's some testing you just can't do on and without a low background environment. So
Can you give me an example?
so for example, if you want to test photon emission from an electrode and you're trying to measure single photons at a very low rate in a scintillator, you can't have the scintillator in a high background environment. So that's definitely going to be something for the Xenon TPCs. I just couldn't tell from Scott's bullet whether he was using the dill fridge type of test stand as an example or as the example. So make sure it's not just the millikelvin stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would suspect he would respond by, I hadn't thought about it. Right. So
The other thing I always challenge people on is how much depth do you really need for those test stands?
Yeah.
Because drive-in access probably cuts the cost in half and extends a usable day by 1.5, right? So
yeah, I think he called out the shallow sites.
the shallow side, yeah. And so it we should be careful that not everything necessarily belongs in surf. And it may be that if you put enough of that together, you say, well, we should develop, one of the drive-in levels at surf, although I don't, those get you a couple 100 feet, I believe.
can you comment?
Yeah, really the only level that's accessible from the surface is a 300, and it's not drive-in. You can walk in, and it's a tunnel. There really isn't much. If you're looking at something the size of a dorm fridge, that would work there, but there really isn't a lot of space.
Isn't the Chicago underground facility that deep as well?
750 feet at Fermi Lab?
No,
I believe it
Chicago.
is.
Chicago is
Land,
20, 40 meter or something like that. It's like P&L,
I think the one at Fermi is what, 300 feet?
300 feet. Yeah, the Minos. Nexus, Minos.
Yeah, there's also the one in North Carolina, isn't there a
Tunnel?
Kerf.
curve? Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
Kerf is now
that's
up at a higher
Virginia.
level.
Isn't Kerf in Virginia? And
Yeah,
isn't it
yeah,
closed
sorry,
right now?
sorry. Got my
think-
eastern states wrong.
I think it's closed for COVID right now. Does anyone know what the status of that might be in the near future?
So I'm not going to.
It's a decadal plan. Let's assume COVID passes.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of saying it. That being said, I did look into Kerf. There is actually a white paper on Kerf in
Yes,
proceedings.
that was before. Yeah, that was before it closed is why I'm asking. I know someone who was planning to do work there who was no longer able to do so. And
Right.
so,
So from that report, it's clear they're in this transition period from, I don't remember the levels, but the deeper level, which is now closed, to a level that's higher up in the mine. It still has substantial overburden and has drive and access. That's where they're setting up a new laboratory that is supposed to be opening. If you read the document, it says like now, but now is, being delayed by COVID. So it's a good question. How do we
Does
measure
anybody
that?
know who owns and operates Kerf? Is it a mining company or is it a university?
It's university.
I thought
Well,
it was Virginia Tech.
The reason I was asking is that, if they're closing the lower level, what drove that decision? That's an odd decision to make with an underground lab.
no,
right?
it had something to do with the overall facility.
The overall facility.
Yeah, I don't remember the details. There's a white paper. I'm not sure that the white paper answers your specific question, though.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. I think I had to ask someone or dig around online to figure out what was happening. Okay, so I made some additional notes under R&D test stands, DRs, but not just DRs, underground liquid noble example, single photon emission from electrodes. And then are there shallower depth requirements, question mark.
So John, the thing that came up at, at SURF and I think at Snow Lab also is the idea of general purpose shielded space. So that you not only are underground, but you have some shielding from the N alpha coming out of the rock kinds of things. I don't know if anybody, proposed anything like this. A water tank or something that is, or a braided shield of lead and things that is of general use, but
Mhm. That's effectively what the cute Bilfridge facility at Snow Lab
Is,
is supposed
yeah.
to be.
is supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I don't know if you did liquid nobles, do you need liquid nobles plus an outer shield, for instance?
Mhm.
I don't want to say you would never need an outer shield. I can't come up with an application right now where you would need more than just getting rid of the cosmic showers.
Okay, well, I wrote down general purpose shielded space under the underground R&D test stands. Anything else that comes to people's minds? Do we have hands online? Don't think so.
I was gonna say, I think these are already.
No.
One person has their hand up on.
Yeah, Danielle can jump in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think these are already covered, but clean room space,
That's
existing
covered.
clean room space and reduced radon air supply as well.
Those
I
are
thought-
those are well
I
covered.
thought
by
those
the-
were well covered already. So.
Yeah, so there, I would say, please go read the report and tell if this is wrong, right? Because those are there. Okay, yeah, Daniel, put your hand down. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have, kind of a page of notes to myself. I won't go through them again. I've already sort of mentioned them once. If there's not anything else that we want to bring up or cover, then the purpose of this was to gather these notes on what else we might need to check to make sure is covered in the UF reports. I appreciate everyone who's commented and contributed. We will take this up with the topical conveners for UF and ensure that we cover these things as necessary to support high energy physics. So unless there's last words, I propose that we close this session and do other things. Okay, thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Bye.